full thing like we've done in years past. Last year we didn't do it because of COVID, and that was a recommendation of everyone on Parks and Rec. And that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Thank you. Trustee Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. A couple of quick announcements from the Public Safety Liaison. The open house this past Sunday with the fire department was a huge success. Kudos to Chief Miller. The turnout was really something. It was great to see. We had hundreds and hundreds of residents out and a number of really interesting stations set up. The kids were just, it was very electric out there. The kids just seemed to really respond to a safe opportunity to work with a fire extinguisher, and it was just a great event, and it took place over at our newly renovated fire station. It was a great venue. The parking was a little different, but I think with the shuttles it worked out very, very well, and there was plenty of space to really spread out and have a number of very engaged activities. The other thing I wanted to mention is congratulations to Lieutenant Rowley and Captain Scalisi, who participated in the Eastern Michigan University Staff and Command graduation ceremony last week. If you recall, last year Captain Scalisi completed Staff and Command. The graduation ceremony unfortunately was canceled due to COVID, so I was glad to see that he went back this year and supported Lieutenant Rowley, and they acknowledged last year's class in a graduation ceremony this year. For those that don't know, our Staff and Command program, the program at Eastern is a very accomplished program, and it's very accredited and an impressive feat. It requires 10 weeks of just absolute full-on commitment, where the participants are required to put together a very, very detailed graduation project. And it's a wonderful opportunity, and as many of our people that we can get into that academy, I think the residents are well served with the not only the networking that happens at these events, but the amount of knowledge that's shared and learned. And to any board member, if you ever have an opportunity to go out and see a graduation ceremony and talk to some of the participants, I was fortunate enough, both Captains McNair and Chief Franks were graduates together, and to go out and see the support from their families and hear some of the presentations that are made for the final graduation projects, just truly impressive. So congratulations again to Captain Scalisi and Lieutenant Rowley. Thank you.
Clerk Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just a couple of pieces of information to update with regards to the Elections Department. We have an election coming up. It is a special general election on November the 2nd. If you would like an absentee ballot for the upcoming November 2nd election, you must request one of those in writing from our office. We can provide you with an application simply by calling our office. You can also receive those if you come into the office, and you can receive a ballot at that time. In fact, all things can be done in our office. You can request a ballot, receive the ballot, vote the ballot, and then return it to us at the same time if you would like to do that. That is still absentee voting. There's a bit of confusion out there that people think because they've come into the clerk's office to vote that they are voting in person. The reality is if you are voting with an envelope ballot where you use an envelope, that is an absentee ballot, even if it occurs here in the clerk's office. Also, the registration deadline to register online or by any other way than in person is also coming up. That will be October the 18th. There's actually a 15-day period prior to an election. There is a deadline that if you wish to register to vote in any other way than in person, there is a deadline for that, and it's 15 days prior to the election. So if within the 15 days of the election, if you know someone who would like to register to vote or you would like to register to vote, you must come and do that in person if it is within 15 days of the election. So please be aware of that. It is our goal in the clerk's office to make sure that everyone who would like to vote has the ability to do that. You can register to vote up to and including Election Day, but again, if it's within that 14-day window before the election, you must do so in person. If you have any questions about the upcoming election, you can call the clerk's office, 949-0400, extension 5. You can also visit our website at chesterfieldtwp.org, and right on the home page, there is a button with a check mark that says Elections, and you can receive all of the information there, as well as helpful links to the Secretary of State's office. You can register to vote online through our website. All of the information that you need to receive a ballot, to register to vote, to find your polling location, all available on our website. And of course, we are available as well, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Monday through Friday, to assist you here in the clerk's office. Thank you.
Department reports. Any department head wishing to make a report? Chief Miller.
Good evening. Just a couple quick items before the board and our guests tonight. Inspectors Roger and Muha in 2 weeks will be attending an advanced fire investigation school. We had an opportunity to place them with the Detroit Police Department arson squad. They'll be down spending a week with the team down there actually digging fires in probably one of the most active locations in the United States for arson investigation. Shortly after that, Inspector Rogers will be attending the Michigan State Police Arson School also. So we will have, that'll bring us to a total of 4 arson investigators within the department. So we're looking forward to them completing that training. Other thing real quick, I wanted to bring up a project that we're working on at the fire department to the board is I brought in one of our newest additions to our equipment. We'll make this available for folks to look at, and if you'd like, I'll pass it around right now. What this small bottle-sized item is it's a weather station. It is solar powered and it ties into an internet system at a building. Our initial plan is we're going to have one on each fire station, one on police headquarters, and one on the DPW building. These will feed information about the exact weather conditions and updates every 6 seconds. Pretty nice to have, but to go even to a deeper depth, all of this information will be reported back so that one of our fire commanders in the field or one of the county hazmat commanders, should we have a chemical emergency along the railroad, the expressway, or one of our plants or factories in Chesterfield that uses chemicals, that instant data can be brought into a software program and could actually show us a plume displacement of how far we might have to tell people to either shelter in place or evacuate in the event of a chlorine leak or something like that. The other thing that we might be able to do in talking with the township supervisor is look at adding some more of these. They're at a very nominal price, about $600 a piece, and perhaps even place one at Brandenburg Park, Pollard Park, some other choice locations around the township where we have internet access, and create a web of immediate weather information that we would use for an emergency. And we could also create links to our social media and our web pages so township residents could go and click on and see exactly what the weather conditions are before they go boating or go to the ball game or something like that. UV, ultraviolet radiation, raindrops, wind speed, everything, all contained right in that little bottle-sized item that we have. Unless there's any questions, Mr. Supervisor, that's all I had for the update.
Thank you, Chief Miller. I'll bring it back up to the board. Item 7, consent agenda. Clerk Berry.
All items under the consent agenda are considered routine by the board and will be enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of these items. If discussion of any item is required by a board member, it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Public comments on the consent agenda items are permitted. 7A, approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of September 28th, 2021. B, approval of the payment of bills as submitted by the Finance Department. And that completes the consent agenda.
Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll support the motion to approve the consent agenda. Comments from the public?
Paul LaFata, 48055 Mallard. If you look at the bill run, one of the first things you'll see on there. And Mr. Kadish and I didn't get invited to the photo op at Brandenburg Park, but it looks like we purchased cider and donuts, and it wasn't for the residents, so most of the people in that photo op were township employees. So we looked at the clerk purchasing food, now we have our F&O department purchasing food. Not for the residents, for the employees. If you look at the bill run, we have continuous charges from our HVAC company. They are in here every month, and we spend $5,000 to $6,000 every month. 3 years ago, I got an email from Ms. Brown at Johnson Control, their worldwide building services company. They offered to do a free survey. We have a Johnson Control program that's never been updated. It's one of the issues, but it seems like we keep sinking money into repairing something, and the people just keep coming back, and they keep coming back, and we keep spending money. We don't fix it right, and during the warm summer months, we get $1,200 gas bills because the heat goes on at night. Doesn't happen at my house. I take care of my heating and cooling. So I don't know why the township doesn't take care of it, because we're wasting taxpayer dollars. We don't have money to waste. And then there's one more thing. There's about $9,000 worth of repairs that were material that was purchased for the historic village. I don't think the board ever approved a agenda item to spend over $5,000 that's in our purchase order. We have process and procedures. We purchase things, and we break our own rules. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments from the public?
John Spica, 53978 Connor Drive. In regards to the bill run, one thing that I can't stand is when taxpayer dollars are being wasted. So under GL 101-253864, it was listed under travel, training, and school. It looks like the clerk, or not the clerk, I'm sorry, the treasurer charged back $20 for a luncheon. My question is, if it's a luncheon, why was it charged under travel, training, and school? And realistically, for $20, I would be embarrassed when you're making over $90,000 and you don't even show up every day for work. So our treasurer has deep pockets and short arms, is the way I put it. Under facilities and operations costs, Mr. LaFata covered it for Blake's Orchard and Cider Donuts for a private photo op where none of the residents were invited. So we had a meeting prior to the photo op, and it was never even mentioned at the meeting. I didn't see any residents besides elected officials at the photo op. It was $122.30. The other thing that caught my eye was under administrative services, under GL 101-275-900.000, the township video of $4,000. So I'm going to guess that this was the video. It was either the video that was shown here or the video that our new supervisor presented for his state of the township. But I think $4,000 for a video, I think, is just outrageous. So I'd like to see these costs cut back. I mean, these pennies add up to dollars, these dollars add up to $100 bills, and these $100 bills add up to thousands of dollars. And this is continuous, every 2 weeks on the bill run. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments from the public? Comments from the board? Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, Mr. Supervisor, normally we don't debate the agenda, but there were a couple of issues that were raised, and I think the discussion about the HVAC is definitely something that I think is, we're in a great position to review this with our upcoming budget. And in terms of the building, and the building maintenance and who's responsible for what is a great opportunity during budget time. I am also hoping that we've exhausted the last photo session out at the ribbon cutting for Brandenburg, which it seems every month now throughout the summer we've had another event out there. So I think we're done with that, hopefully. And the last issue that was raised with regard to the food, I really I don't know how and why, but it's something that's been debated over and over and over, and I thought we were beyond that as well. Last thing was the video that was referenced, and I hope that we sit down and talk about the economic development ideas, which I know that video and those types of things promoting our township, something that was discussed in our master plan with the branding and the signage is all something that I think should be part of our budget discussion, and I'm all for that. So I'm okay with that area, and look forward to budget where we can pin some of these expenses down. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a motion by Clerk Berry, supported by Supervisor Kersten, to approve the consent agenda as read. And I apologize, yes, I mishandled this one, so. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Clerk Berry, aye. Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Hi.
Trustee DeVlaminck.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Item 8, regular agenda. Item 8A. Clerk Berry?
Item 8A, approve a request to transfer a Class C liquor license to Rare Hospitality International, Inc., doing business as Longhorn Steakhouse, formerly the location of Ruby Tuesdays, which is located at 51295 Gratiot Avenue, Chesterfield, Michigan, 48051, and adopt resolution number 2021-28.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Trustee DeVlaminck, support by Trustee Joseph. Is the applicant present?
Good evening, Mr. Supervisor. Patrick Howe, attorney for the applicant Rare Hospitality International, Inc. As mentioned, this is a redevelopment of a former Ruby Tuesday. Somewhat unique coming out of the pandemic to have such an investment from an out-of-state company. Somewhat unique in Southeast Michigan. It'll employ many people here in the township, be open for lunch and dinner. This will be their 8th location in the state, Longhorn Steakhouse. It's a subsidiary of Darden Restaurants out of Orlando. They have a great operating record and will do a great job. We're purchasing a license in Macomb County and transferring it here. Happy to answer any questions you have, and thank you for your support.
I'd just like to say thanks for coming to Chesterfield and bringing a business that I'm sure the residents will enjoy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
No further comments from the board. I have a motion by public comments. Seeing no public comments, we'll bring it back up to the board. I have a motion by Trustee DeVlaminck, second by Trustee Joseph. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee DeVlaminck.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 8B. Thank you.
you.
Thank you, sir. Item 8B, Clerk Berry.
Item 8B is to approve a recommendation from the Fire Department to purchase 6 sets of protective turnout gear in the amount of $17,552.09 through Dingesfire Company from GL number 205-340-977000.
So move.
Support?
Motion by Trustee Anderson, supported by Clerk Berry. Chief Miller.
Good evening once again. Bit of a housekeeping issue here. We're taking care of some expired gear that has come to the end of its lifespan and replacing some equipment for some new hire personnel. Brings us together for this purchase of 6 sets of firefighter protective coats and pants.
Thank you, Clerk Berry. Trustee DeVlaminck.
Chief, what do they do with the old stuff? You know, when it's, you know, they don't use it to firefighters, they pass it on anywhere to, let's say, for police, fire, arson investigators, like when they're going to dig a fire, so they got a code, or, I mean, what do they do with the old gear?
The last batch of old gear that we had, we turned over to the Sea Cadets group up in St. Clair County, and the kids would use it for non-fire conditions, but training their division of the Boy Scout program.
Okay, all right, thank you, sir.
Trustee Vosper.
Thank you. I support this motion. I'm just curious, what is the life expectancy of that gear? You said some of it's expired. How long does it last?
It is from the date of manufacture to the date that it's no longer OSHA approved for our personnel to wear is 10 years.
Thank you, Chief Miller. Comments from the public? Seeing no comments from the public, I have a motion by Trustee Anderson, supported by Clerk Barry. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye. Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee DeMink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 8D.
Item 8D is a recommendation to upgrade the Township BSNA software program to BSNA Cloud at a cost not to exceed $300,000 from GL number 101-228-984-000 and to execute the contract between BSNA and Chesterfield Township.
Do I have a motion to support or to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Vosberg, second by Clerk Barry. Deputy Duchesne.
Thank you, Supervisor Kersten, members of the board. The agenda item tonight is a recommendation to upgrade the BSNA software program the Township presently utilizes in its form to the BSNA Cloud at a cost not to exceed, as you heard, $300,000. A little bit more on the breakdown on the cost is that we are requesting $287,400, which is actually the cost of services and fees, but the additional $12,960 will go to training as we make the conversion. In the report, I won't go along in the report. You have before you the background statement, the scope of the services, the phased process of transitioning to a cloud, and as you'll note that more than 8 of our other primary software systems are cloud-based at the present time. The annual cost with the new modules and the integrated platform before you is going to be $138,937, which is an increase from the current $45,901. But in a true cost-benefit analysis, you have to consider the decreased servers, the speed and accuracy and elimination of 2 other software products, both ADP and the former work order system facilities presently uses. If those are taken out of the equation, the actual net increase is around $59,000 as we proceed. So the BSNA cloud version of the software we feel would benefit the residents and employees of the township in utilizing these programs every day. It creates a mobile platform, and along with the additional pieces that we mentioned, timesheets, human resource, payroll, and the work order system will improve overall personnel management and financial operations. It does provide one point of global address entry into the system, and it connects all the field service applications and modules so that business may be performed from a variety of mobile locations and devices. Tonight with us is Steve Rennell, Account Executive with BSNA, and I would like to, at the board's pleasure, have Mr. Rennell do a presentation regarding this particular modification to their software system. Mr. Rennell.
Thank you. And that was a good introduction. I actually couldn't have done it as good myself, so I appreciate that information. So in terms of what I'm going to talk to you about, I'm going to talk briefly on a few topics. Who is BSNA software? So who is it you're proposing to do business with? What is it that we're proposing? The benefits of this solution. And then briefly, I wanted to open up the software. I just wanted to show you a couple features that I think will give you an idea of some of the expanded capabilities. So in terms of who is BSNA software, We've been around since 1987. We're a Michigan-based company. And when we were founded, our goal was to provide software for local units of government. And that started with just a couple programs, a tax and assessing program. And today, so in 1987, we had 0 customers. Today, every single county uses BS&A assessing or equalization software. 100% of the counties use our tax software. And 63% of the counties in 400 townships and 400 cities, approximately, use the financial software that we're talking about here. So we went from 0 customers to a large percentage of the people in Michigan. And the reason that we were able to do that is really one thing. And it's what the president of the company told me when he hired me. It's BS&A is insane about customer support. Our number one mission is keeping our customers happy. In terms of what we're proposing, so currently you have financial and building department software with BS&A. We're proposing to migrate that to the cloud. BS&A began working on this right about a little before the pandemic, but the pandemic made this even more important for us and for our customers. We're also going to move you from an outsourced payroll to doing payroll in-house using BS&A applications. We'll conduct comprehensive training and provide ongoing support for those applications. The phase 2 of this would be to migrate your current tax and assessing applications to the cloud, and at that same time, implement work order software for Public Works. So what are the benefits of this? Obviously, I've talked about it being in the cloud. It means you can access it anywhere, anytime, as long as you have access to the internet. So if there is further pandemic issues or other issues and employees are working remotely, they can get at the software from anywhere. But also employees can see their paychecks from the internet. They can do lots of different things that might give them access to relevant information. Because we're doing this in the cloud, BS&A and Microsoft will be responsible for providing the servers, so that will eliminate some of the needs on your current in-house IT staff, eliminate server. But the other thing that it does is it provides a set of scalable resources. So today, if for some reason something happened, it's the end of your fiscal year and you're doing a lot of work, maybe your server is going to be overwhelmed. Well, in this environment, you have the ability to scale the servers or to scale the equipment that's available to support you. Because we're monitoring what you're using, we've got the ability to apply additional resources as they might be needed. So it's really an infinite set of scalable resources as needed. It will reduce your concerns and risks related to ransomware and security. It'll streamline the software update process because BS&A will run that software update process, and you just log in and see that the applications are there and on the most current versions. And then we automate the backup process and take responsibility for the backup process as well. In terms of employees here in the township, what it will do is allow for the automation of processes. So in this new solution, we have the ability to say, when this thing happens, do this, right? And that can apply to lots of different cases, but it might be things like when a PO is over budget, notify the supervisor, or send it back to the department and reject it, or whatever it is that we want to have the workflow do, the system has the capability to do that. The other thing that it allows you to do is to customize how users interact with the system. So today in BS&A applications, you kind of have to make global decisions that says, hey, everyone in the township is going to use the software this way. But in this new solution, each user has the ability to customize how they interact with the system. One department might do purchase orders on a very infrequent basis, and so for them, getting an email would be fine every time they have a purchase order to approve. Other departments might do tons of those, and they wouldn't want an email every single time. So by user or by department, we can say, hey, when this department gets a purchase order, send them an email. But when this one gets one, just send them an email once a day or once a week. Or we can send text messages. We can do essentially however that user or that department wants to interact with the system. Also from a reporting standpoint, the reports are streamlined and easier to use, but those run in the background. So if you need to run a report, there are some reports that could take a while if we're going to look across a huge cross-section of information. You can just say, run this report and tell me when it's done, and then continue to do your work, and the system will notify you when it's done. That also ties into that scalability issue, because that's actually happening on a different server, not the server that you're using to interact with. It's happening on a server dedicated for reporting. Other benefits in terms of user tools. So we've implemented what's called fuzzy search, and it sounds kind of silly, but what it really allows you to do is to just put in any piece of information that you're looking for, something generic like banks, and say, I want to see where is bank reference? Where does the word bank appear in here? And we'll say, oh, we have banking set up here. We have cut some checks to these banks. Employees have leave banks, all kinds of different places. But it makes it easy to find the information that you're looking for just by typing in a small piece of that information. We'll also have one address for each parcel within the township. So today, BSNA applications are kind of independent yet connected, but there are places where we might have an address or a person listed 3 or 4 different places. Now we're going to put those into one global address database and one global people database and connect those and share those. So if an address does change, it updates everything. The utility bill goes to the right place, maybe a miscellaneous invoice, a building permit, all of those things. The feature that I'm going to show you in the demonstration are customizable dashboards. And what these allow you to do is, we're talking about a system that has access to a lot of different information. What these dashboards allow you to do is to say, I want to see in a quick view the stuff that's important to me. And I'll show you that more in just a second. And then in terms of user configuration, I talked a little bit about user configuration in terms of how you interact with the system, but you can also store different views of information. Like I want to see the work orders assigned to me, or I want to see the work orders related to parks, or what have you. So the ending result will be one fully integrated system with all applications sharing the same information. In terms of cloud advantages, it is a single database. Today, all of these BSNA programs are independent databases that are connected. This joins them all together, and so now you can run reports across applications where it wasn't possible to do that today. I talked about running reports in the background and scalability, as well as, I think I've talked about most of the other things on that list. So in terms of features, one of the new features that we're talking about, so we're using ADP for payroll today. We're proposing bringing that in-house. The primary advantage of that is that it allows you to have fringes, or to have the fringes follow the wages. So if I work 2 hours in the Parks Department and 10 hours in streets and 4 hours on utilities, when I do that, it will have my fringe benefits follow those hours so that you can accurately account for the payroll costs associated with any activity. And today in ADP, that's a real challenge to get that information. In addition to that, it will also provide some features for budgeting personnel, because ADP information is not connected to the financial system. It's tough to use that history and say, let's predict what payroll will be next year. Because that will all be in BSNA, we can say, hey, let's take this history we have, based on that, make some what-if scenarios to predict the future. The human resources functions are some of what I just talked about, but it also allows you to track other information related to employees. FMLA, OSHA, training, development, drug test results, benefit plans, as well as applicant tracking. A timesheets feature is a feature that allows users to enter their own time, so that this can be approved by management and then forwarded into the payroll process for automatic entry into payroll without anybody rekeying it or touching it if it doesn't need to be. It's also some other features in this timesheet solution allow you to record your time towards those different activities, or time where you use equipment or materials or things of that nature that would make it easy to account for that as well. And then the last piece in terms of new functionality is a work order solution. And what this allows you to do is, as you would expect, is create work orders for a variety of different tasks. So the system can set up different work order types, and each type of work order is going to behave differently. They might get assigned to a group or to a user. They can be tied to GIS maps. They can be associated with your Outlook calendar. And then all of that information would be integrated with the financial system. So in terms of time frame, so we have the first 2 activities on there are listed as discovery. And essentially what that is we come into the township and we say, okay, how are you doing things today? How do you think you want to do them in the future? and then we say, that's good, but here are some better ways to do that. And so we'll make some recommendations for things that we think could improve your processes. Ultimately, it's your decision though, and the system's configurable so we can do it many different ways. But the goal of that is to come up with an optimal deployment. So the training would begin in September of 2022 for the building, shortly after that for financials and the payroll functions, and then tax and assessing would be towards the end of the year and work order shortly after that. So the one thing I did want to show is just a little bit on what these dashboards look like, because they are extremely powerful. So what we're looking at here is a dashboard, and there's a bunch of little boxes on there, and each box contains information that might be important. So this blue box over here these are things that are waiting for my approval, and I'm really on top of it. It says there's 0. There's nothing that I'm supposed to be approving. There's nothing that's waiting for me. But if I look down here, I can see that there are some purchases that are currently open, and I can click on that and say, oh, here's the 6 different purchase orders that are open that maybe we're waiting for somebody else to approve. I also have 3 purchase orders that are over budget. And if I click on that, I can see the details of what it is that we're purchasing that's over budget. I have similar information here for general ledger line items that are over budget. Down here, I've got a chart that says, what are our expenses budget to actual by fund? And I can hover over this to see the details of what my budget is, or click on this, maybe make that a little bit bigger for you, and see, okay, what is this now broken down by department? And then I can go further than that and see this broken down by activity. And so this is really one example of a dashboard. This is something that's important to me. These were mostly financial metrics, but maybe in the building department, I might have some other things that are important. And I can see, contractors that are expiring, permits that are in process, inspections happening tomorrow, whatever it is that I want to see, and they can be presented to me in a number of different ways. And so the idea would be that each employee or department would have a dashboard so that when they log in, they can quickly see the stuff that's requiring their attention or that is important to them. So I don't know how I did on my time, but that was what I intended to present to you. I'd be happy to address questions if you have any.
I think you did a good job for me. Not that we've sat through it a couple times. Comments from the public? Any comments from the public?
Software is a tool, and like every tool, if it's not used properly, it's really not effective. So some of the questions I have is in the process flow for setting up these modules, like the purchasing module, where you said that one was over budget. Purchases currently are made still before approvals. How do you lock the system up to force an employee, or can the system be locked to force an employee to follow the process and not circumvent it? Because that's what the township needs. It seems like we don't have the discipline that it takes to follow our process and procedures. If this does this, it'll be a wonderful advantage for the township, be a wonderful addition. The $300,000 price tag's a little steep. In the private sector, we usually look and say, well, I'm gonna, replace an operator with a robot. I'm gonna save X amount of dollars in so many years. I'm gonna get a payback on my $300,000. Are we gonna save enough in servers? The township 2 years ago just purchased all new servers. Are we gonna not utilize the ones we have? Should we look at selling them? We've already put an investment into new servers 2 years ago, all of them. And we have servers here, we have backup servers at the sewer and water department. But if this system can force people to do the right thing, then I'm all for it. But if it can't and it can be circumvented, then I think we still have a continuing problem, because that's what's going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lafata. Any further comments from the public?
John Speaka, 53978 Connor Drive. With the price tag at $300,000, I have an issue with that. I think that's excessively high. If we can cut and make sufficient cuts to get our return on investment, I'm okay with that, but I haven't heard of any cuts and how we're gonna get our return on investment. And the data that you plug into that is only as good as the people that plug the data into that. So we've got a couple systems in place right now on purchase orders that we've purchased that are shelved where you can't even get an answer on work hours that aren't put in correctly and not utilized. So I'm a little concerned that with this price tag at $300 or $300,000, I just want to make sure we're going to utilize it. We're not going to shelf it and people use the system properly. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? Bring it back up to the board. Clerk Barry?
Thank you. I just have a question. Sure. So I know that we're going to be migrating to the cloud-based solution with this proposal, and it's relying upon the internet. What is the backup system or the fail-safe? If the internet is not available, then how is the information accessed?
Yeah, so I mean, if we don't have access to the internet, it would be just like you not having access to your server today. You would not have ability to access the software.
Trustee Domingue.
Question I have is on the HR stuff. Steve, you might be able to answer this since you've dealt with this for us, sir. Because there's a lot of HR stuff, and HR is a sensitive issue, and I noticed some of the things you had on there, will he be the only one, or Supervisor Kersten then all have access to that, or will all employees have access to that?
So the system includes a pretty robust security feature, so every single field within the system, we can decide that you have access to it or don't.
Okay.
And so then, so we can decide, can you see it and can you do something with it? And so we can set up
So
security.
like general employees won't have access to everything in HR because he or the supervisor have files on employees or training, or you have drug tests or whatever, that is no one's business except the two of them because they're over the HR. So those are locked out for everybody else.
True. It's possible that we may want to have department heads have access to some of these things. So one example is in HR, you can track what assets you've given to the employee. Maybe they have a cell phone, a laptop, a gun or something. And so maybe that's the department head's responsibility. So the department head in theory could go into HR and see only that. What assets do the employees have? They could see nothing else in HR. Those are decisions that you can make. BSNA is configurable to allow you to do, from a security standpoint, whatever you want. No one can access it, or just some people can.
Okay.
And just
So those
pieces of
I'm
the data.
concerned is security reason on issues that are not public or deemed for other employees.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Trustee Voss.
Thank you. I have, I think, 3 questions. And a follow-up to the question asked by the clerk. If the internet is down, we have no way of accessing the data, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, is there a way to restore from the cloud to our in-house servers should there be some major long-term internet issue?
Yeah, I mean, so in theory, we could bring the databases. Let's just say that Microsoft got bombed or something, and all of their servers were offline, and we knew that that was going to happen, going to be that way for a long time. We could decide, okay, let's move the implementation here or to a BSNA facility or something of that nature. So if you didn't have access to the internet, but just locally you had the servers, I guess it would be possible to bring the software in-house.
So is the data stored somewhere else besides the cloud?
Well, it's stored in the cloud, but it is backed up, and it's backed up off-site so that if that particular installation were to go down, they could have it up and running in another, you know, if there was just a problem with the building, they could have it up and running in a different building without any difficulty. I mean, that's what they do for.
Okay. I have a question about, you showed the budget thing. If something went over budget, there'd be a notice that is happening. Is that by the general ledger item number, or is that by cost center, or can you do either one?
It's, that report that I showed was by general ledger number, but you could have a dashboard to show, you know, department or groupings of items, or however you really wanted to look at that.
Okay, so that can be adjusted, again, depending on our need and depending on our policies?
Yeah, so that dashboard, you can pretty much customize about almost whatever information you want summarized in whatever way. So you could see that in lots of different ways.
Okay. And then my last question is, how much of this, the accounting part, is the finance is viewable by the public? I know I'm familiar with looking at assessing and taxes. As a member of the public, you can go on the BSNA and look real easily at my own real estate taxes or my neighbors or whatever. How much of finance would the public be able to see?
So there's very little of the finance piece that's available, but it's essentially anything that is a bill that's going to a person, right? So there's miscellaneous bills. Sometimes maybe people don't cut their grass and the township cuts it. I don't know if you guys do that or not, but you might cut their grass and then bill them for it. So if you created a bill, if you created an invoice for something, then we can put those invoices online and make them available. So that would be like miscellaneous invoices. It could be building permits, code enforcement violations, tax assessing information, utility bills. All of those things can be viewable online, but you have the ability to control each one of those independently. Yes, we are going to put that online, or no, we're not. And then if we do put it online, are we just going to put summary information like just what's due on the utility bill, or are we going to put all the history? It's up to you.
Okay, so I would not be, let's say I saw a vendor vehicle on the property and I wondered as a member of the public, wonder what they're doing there. I wouldn't be able to necessarily look up that vendor to see, did they do some work and get paid by us? There are some municipalities that have those types of viewable accounting, and that's why I was wondering if this was like
Yeah, I mean, so we have the ability, if we want to publish reports, like, well, you guys didn't open up your check register, but that check register that I assume was in your packet, that is created by BSNA. And if you wanted to publish that, you could, but you would just create a link just to that individual document.
Okay. All right, so there is, if we chose to be more transparent about the finance part, end of it, there could be some ways to generate a report or dashboard or something?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
Sure.
Mr. Supervisor.
Trustee Joseph.
I have a couple of questions as well, and maybe we can start with Deputy Duchesne. You introduced the presentation, you mentioned. Thank you. When you introduced the presentation, you talked briefly about the utilization of BSNA and how it would replace a couple of existing vendors that we're currently using. And I was wondering if you could put some numbers to that, specifically the first and probably the biggest, which is the payroll system, and that would be ADP. What do we look to save by, going to the BSNA?
Just, hopefully you can just hear me short term. Thank you. Trustee Joseph, we're looking at a couple of bills that total between the work order and ADP and that running around 34,000 by very proximate estimate right now. I can obviously drill down and get some very tight numbers on that, but so you have an offset there. We have a work order system. We're presently annualized at about 6,000 for just annual fees, and in excess of that, there is some other costs to go with it. So we take that out of the mix, go to the BSNA work order system that was contemplated at one time a couple of years ago, and that obviously the efficiency of that integrates all of that data from the work order and populates general ledger and does the other one. Our current work order system does not. So that's one area. So about $34,000.
That's just in the upfront, what we know we're paying for those particular softwares, but I was wondering if you could also in terms of inefficiencies, we have multiple systems, if you will, among the department heads when it comes to things like payroll and reporting payroll and tracking, leave and how we do this on a pay period by pay period basis. And it struck me as, really a quite inefficient process where you have employees dedicated to, just very laborious kinds of things. We go to a universal BSNA format, and everybody is doing the same thing, speaking the same language, inputting in the same way. The amount of work hours, I imagine, would be streamlined as well.
Yes, I think that contention is easily visible and supported when you have about 6 different payroll methodologies. Currently, we have some paper, we have some time check-in, we have over in public safety a different payroll or a work schedule tracking system that must be then manually and some transmitted to finance, which is then reworked. There's a number of spreadsheets that are utilized in the different processes, and we don't have what we would call a master file available to us. For those familiar with it and working in organizations where everything about an employee is in one place, including a full range of benefits and payroll changes, and those are manually done, and ADP doesn't present those to us right now. So I didn't put a hard number on it, but obviously it is clear and transparent that when you go from a multiplicity of systems and a lot of manual separate workflow, including Excel spreadsheets and that, to one system centrally located, there is no doubt you have efficiency. I do know in a similar organization that I once worked for, we had, for example, 1.5 people doing accounts payroll and payroll at the same time. So that changes the dynamic both in cost and obviously goes to the bottom line of efficiency, utilization of personnel.
So we heard a couple of residents that came forward and talked about their familiarity with BSNA, and it's a wonderful tool. If it's not utilized and you don't have buy-in, it's just a tool that sits wastefully, and a very expensive tool that sits wastefully. So I would like, as we continue to roll out the timeline, for some updates from you as you see it being implemented and integrated, some of the changes that translate to dollars. Specifically, one of the things that Steve mentioned in his presentation was the ability to track not only employee costs, assets, and but also fringes. So we don't even have the capability to do that if we wanted to. And for a number of projects that have come forward where the department head is talking about acting in essence as the general contractor with in-house labor and how we would save money by not contracting out, we weren't really able to get a comparative evaluation of whether or not that was a true cost savings or not, because in most presentations it included, I'll have to get back to you on the hours of labor. We couldn't track that very easily, and it was usually left out of the presentations. This would allow us to know instantly what the project calls for in terms of everything from fuel costs to transportation to the materials, the employee's hourly rate, and if it involved multiple employees from different departments, those benefits and hourly, and so we could get a very comprehensive, deeply detailed analysis of the projects. But one of the things that was mentioned from a system utilization standpoint, we have a bill run, and we're asked every board meeting, we include it in our consent agenda, to pay for invoices that have been received, but the reality is a number of those invoices have already been paid. So tracking, as was mentioned earlier, something that's gone over budget, you really don't know unless we have a standardized utilization and policies associated with how we input the data. We spent a couple of board meetings ago a ridiculous amount of time talking about the purchase of a refrigerator. only to find out it had already been purchased. The equipment was already in the township. It was part of the bill run as a proposal to approve an invoice. It had already been purchased. So that's a policy workaround. That's not, as I understand it, the way we're supposed to be approving bill runs. But if we're approving things, how would you know if something is over budget if you have constant workarounds? And what's our strategy for that moving forward? It is something that is critical to fully utilizing this. And then the last thing that I would like some feedback on is the estimated time frame. The discovery, personnel, and financials is set to begin under this timeline in April of 2022. What are we doing between now and then? What is our incorporation and implementation strategy with the training that's going to be required of our staff? And why are we implementing the first sort of touch point spring of next year? Why not start right away?
Yeah, so some of this we are going to start right away. So one of the things that we need to do is we need to do some data conversion, and that has to be a multi-phased effort. So we need to do data conversion initially to find out if there are any problems, right? So we need all your employees that are getting paid today, we need to get those into BSNA and figure out, are there any issues with generating paychecks? So we're going to do that once early, and then when we do that on-site discovery, what we're going to do is bring that data to you and say, hey, here's your data in BSNA. Here's how this is going to operate when we make decisions. And then we're going to find something that's wrong. We're going to say, wait a minute, we're doing something wrong with that one pay code or whatever it is. And so we fix that up. And so we'll need to do that again just before you go live. So we do start this process early. It ramps up very heavily at that on-site discovery process. And then from there on, we have a list of issues that need to be addressed, because BSNA is going to give you some recommendations. And we're going to say, here's a way that you could do this, and we think it would be better, but you need to make decisions, and that doesn't happen overnight. So we'll have a checklist of, here's all the things that we need to resolve between now and implementation. And between that on-site discovery and implementation, we're checking those off and having meetings and discussions to make sure, okay, we understand how we're going to resolve that one and this one. And so there's just a number of those things that have to happen between that discovery and implementation period.
My last, and then I'll just, could we also incorporate into this, and this isn't part of the agenda item, but as a routine, maybe monthly, to have an update provided to the board and to the public as to, what we've done in the previous month, so as we ramp up towards, we can give feedback and requests, because one of the things that Trustee Vosberg mentioned is something that is widely available, and I would like to see, as we're exploring more transparency, is the ability to just go on to the Township website and have a dashboard that's provided to residents that lay out maybe even some of the things that, Mr. Supervisor, you incorporate in your supervisor's update. So you have like big projects that could be shared with not only the board, but with the public. So if somebody wanted to log in and see what phase and where we were at with the bridge project, that is a very heavy project that is being worked on daily, and you could track the progress and see, with limitations in terms of, sensitive data and so forth, but make that public and very, very, user accessible and transparent. And I think perhaps maybe some monthly updates as we integrate this, just to give us some feedback as to how the rollout is going would be helpful.
The end goal is going to be for you to log on yourself, and you will have your own access. You will be able to see the progression as we move forward through this timeline. And then obviously, the more public information we can provide to the public, that we're going to do that.
Great. Thank you.
Trustee Anderson?
Yeah, I think you probably answered a lot of my concerns during your presentation here on page 2. What are we proposing? Moving from outsourced payroll to in-house, that was kind of unique. Seems this board likes to go the opposite way. So, Trustee DeVlaminck brought up a couple of points. What would be available, and I would hope that there would be, the public would have access to this, that they'd be able to see. Mr. Supervisor, you talked about that's the end goal, that our public can actually go online and see what's going on, check out these things. Don't need to find out what kind of weapons the police are carrying, or, you know, laptops and things of that nature. I think that we'd leave that out. We're kind of heady on this right now. We're kind of excited. Question I have, Mr. Duchesne, you would ensure that this program in its entirety would be implemented by our employees here in the township, and you would be able to get back within reasonable times, monthly or biweekly progress reports on what's happening to this board?
Most assuredly, and I would say, having watched the implementation take place a few times before this, there is no reason the employees can't adjust to this. It is a combination of realignment on priorities, and as supervisor and his full-time officials have taken grasp of this to be transparent and to make personnel changes that are already underway, reforming, realigning purchasing and payroll systems to prepare for this, because as many of you have said, and it's very obvious, these are tools. People have to operate the tools. Having seen this transition before, there is going to come to a point that when the tools are fully migrated, and they're very effective, and they're proven 800 times in Michigan that it works, if you can't use it the next time, that will be the last time that you use it. And I don't want to be ominous, but there is no question that these tools are built around governmental users. They are utilized consistently. They have their own vetting. There is a process there that it was mentioned that if people do workarounds on the software, that is our responsibility to ensure they don't. You can put blocks into it. You can, for example, when a PO is subject to restrictions, if that is over budget, it gets kicked back, that person gets corrected. The supervisor's already taken steps in meetings to make sure that the financial administration actually is ahead of the software. And those will be things that we'll continue to be doing right now. So I can assure you, we'll be reporting. I can see certainly a day, because if the quality of the data is improved, you could see a published monthly budget report, because we produce one. The concern is that it's not 100% explainable and understood in its form. We can make improvements on that, so it is. And then the public would see where the budget status is monthly. We publish progress reports. We're making a number of steps in those directions. There is no reason that utilizing this software that ties like a 2-hour block of time. I know townships don't deal with this much, but you saw on Mr. Riddell's presentation where it shows under work orders a block of time for Act 51 and other costs. Simply means if you send 2 people out in a truck, they have a hourly value, they have a baked-in cost and value on an hourly basis, and the vehicle, according to something called Schedule C published by the Department of Transportation of the state of Michigan, has a rental rate with it. It's an internal process, but the cost goes with them. And that's what gets turned in the work order, which then is published to and recorded by the general ledger. Getting back to Trustee Joseph's report about what the full cost center is with this kind of system. So that becomes a real tool and a management responsibility. But if management doesn't manage it, we're very aware that there will be flaws, and those have to be corrected as we go ahead. But this is the vehicle to get you where you should be.
Okay, the final thing is old versus new. A little over a year ago, I put a request in for specific work orders on a project being completed and or being worked on. It was very specific in my inquiry on the work orders in our existing system, what was being done there. And all I received was a very polite response. I didn't receive any information that I specifically requested, which wasn't that much. Under this system, I would be able to go and possibly look at a project out here that's going on and get a good idea what the expenditures are and things of that nature.
I think as Mr. Riddell said, any document that is created under the proper positions and access point could be a document that's viewed. If it's a work order, then it can be viewed and you could see the actual work orders live. we should always be able to produce those for you if there is a work order. We presently have 2 work order systems on kind of a workaround with our website that created for IT and also physical work orders. There's something behind that. And if you need a copy of that or request a copy of that, most assuredly, we can produce that.
And you'll follow through on that too, as far
Yes, sir.
as, thank you.
Trustee DeMink.
Real quick, to Steve, and Brad, does this have any of the features of that Kronos Workforce Ready that I discussed with you guys a couple months ago?
That'll be a future discussion.
Okay.
That's a third party that,
Oh.
I don't, we'll.
That
we'll look
doesn't,
at what's-
BSA does not have?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I was just curious.
It is an interface that they can do.
Okay.
So, just some closing comments for it. This is gonna be a slow, methodical process, and the reason it's gonna be slow and methodical is because some of the systems that we need to build, some systems that aren't in place right now, some systems that have to be built into the implementation process, that would make it as, exactly what Trustee Joseph has mentioned. This is a restructuring of how we operate. It forces you to restructure, it forces a consistent drive across all departments within the township to work for one common goal, and it lives within a single platform. All of this information that we talk about and that was presented to us. And with that being said, any further comments? Clerk Berry, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just like to address some of the, a couple questions I think that Trustee Vosberg asked, and maybe some members of the public, just to give some assurances to the board members as well as the public. With regards to the security of the information, and the question that I asked was, if the internet's down, then what? How do we access it? Well, you can't. Well, the good news for us is that in our records management division, I implemented a protocol of backing up all of our servers, all of the records that live on our 4 main servers, including BSNA, the entire BSNA platform, the entire Laserfish program, all emails, all correspondence, all of the software applications, various software applications that we utilize where records may exist. All of those things are backed up on a monthly basis. There's a 4-week rotation, and each one is backed up where all those records are backed up every 4 weeks. So in the case of BSNA, the current BSNA application that we utilize is backed up every 4 weeks on an external hard drive that is kept secured in the clerk's office. So this particular cloud-based solution should have that same capability, and we will continue to maintain that security protocol so that in an event that everything should go down, the internet's not accessible, our servers go down, we can go into our safe, pull out the external hard drives, and we will have, with the exception of the last 30 days, we will have up to the last backup of all records that the township holds.
Thank you. I have a motion by Trustee Vosberg, second by Clerk Berry, to approve item 8D. Clerk Berry, call the roll.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee DeMink.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 9, addendums, if necessary. There are no addendums. Item 10, public comments. Public comments, there is a 5-minute time limit.
Thank you.
Paul LaFata, 48055 Mallard. I received a YouTube film clip from a friend of mine. It was all about PFAS. It was pretty, eye-opening. PFAS isn't going to go away by itself. PFAS is forever. Residents have no idea of the potential effects of PFAS. It damages the liver, gives you thyroid disease, decreases fertility, high cholesterol, obesity, hormone suspension, and cancer. Well, there's 2 words that I learned in my 4 years in office. Responsibility and accountability are 2 words that took me 4 years to realize that a politician does not have in his or her dictionary. Politicians are people who will say or do anything to get elected or to gain power. A statesman is someone who does everything for the common good of the people they represent. Politicians campaign, they spend tax dollars on what benefits them and makes them look good. Politicians continue to invite sound-deadening environmental issues of the F-35 into our backyards and do nothing to address the PFAS issues at Selfridge for promises of financial wealth that is a mystery. Too many politicians in Michigan, too many politicians in Macomb County, and too many politicians in Chesterfield Township Board. Somebody needs to do something about the PFAS issue. It's not going to go away. It continues to build in the body, and it's in our water. It's in the water, in the bay. It comes down the Clinton River. There's a vortex that goes around in a circle, and there's drinking water that goes into Mount Clemens and to New Baltimore. Lucky enough, we don't get it. But if anybody took time to look at that, it took 5 charcoal canisters to filter out PFAS, and it's in the water. The 127th Wing Environmental Report says it's in our water, and it's to the limits that the U.S. government doesn't even want to acknowledge right now. The other thing is I kind of forwarded you an article that I read in the Free Press about financial stability of municipalities. Somebody needs to look at that because this isn't going to be a good year for finances in Chesterfield Township. The market's not doing so well right now, so that means we're going to have more of an outlay for OPEB to stay up with our current debt limit. And you look at the inflation and everything's going up, gasoline and everything else. So our 222 budget is going to be very important. So somebody needs to understand and look and see where the money's coming from, because in 2016, our government operations was a little over $4 million. In 2020, it's over $6 million. In a 4-year period, the government, Chesterfield's government operating budget increased by $2 million, and our revenue hasn't increased that much. Thank you.
Further comments from the public?
Joe Kadich, 32825 Sutton Road. Just want to follow up a little bit about PFAS that Paul brought up. When this idea of having the F-35s into Selfridge started about 4 years ago, it was brought on essentially a program started by Mark Hackle to get the rest of the whole county behind him saying, we need these F-35s. We, Paul and I and some others, realized there were some issues bringing the F-35s here. One was PFAS, the other one is the noise issue. Because when the planes take off, they're immediately over Chesterfield, running about 85 decibels. Since then, nothing has come out. It's come out about the PFAS in Selfridge, but nothing's been done about it. A couple months ago, I had talked, probably more than that, I talked to EGLE, the EGLE, basically it's under their rem to try and establish parts per billion or trillion of PFAS in the body. And I asked them, I says, I knew they had trouble at the other air bases that were closed up north, I think in Tawas, and the other ones in the Upper Peninsula. And they weren't meeting the standards. The Air Force wasn't go back and trying to meet the standards. They just figured they're gone out of there, it's not their problem. But it is your problem here. Now, Paul says, okay, this can get into the PFAS can get into the water in Mount Clemens, but can also get into the Detroit River water. And we have inlets in the Detroit River that supply the Detroit Water Department, consequently coming out to us.
Being that you're part of a group, I don't remember what the group is, they were all the townships and the municipalities buying together. I would ask that somebody, probably from the water department or somebody, start up a group there to go back and have all the water departments join together and start their own initiative, how they're gonna stop it from Selfridge and the other areas they are. Eagle's got, I think there's 17 companies that they're suing right now over their dumping PFAS into the rivers and that. But nobody's doing anything about this one. I know there was a bill going through Congress to pay out, I think, $50 million to different air bases around the country to get rid of the PFAS. Selfridge was excluded, but I understand now they're supposed to be added as number one. It may take care of it, at least get that down. But nobody's putting any word out about it. Nobody's worried about it. And this thing is gonna come up and bite us. If it doesn't bite me, it'll bite your kids, your grandkids. It's a chemical that doesn't go away. I saw the YouTube that Paul was talking about, which was a lot better than the one I originally saw 4 or 5 years ago called, what was it? The Devil We Know. And it talked about how PFAS started, what it does, ruined the whole town, not just ruined the town, but medically ruined them. And everybody just sits there and figures it's gonna go away or something. It's not. And I'd like to have somebody put in this organization and go out and canvass the rest of these municipalities and see if they can get a combined effort to help tackle this. The state's not been able to. When I talked to the Eagle person at the state, I asked him, I said, well, how's it going? His response was, well, how much time do you have? That's how it's going. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
John Spica, 53978 Connor Drive. At the last Township Board meeting, I specifically asked Treasurer Elliott if the purchasing and credit card policies are going to be changed to make the clerk personally responsible for any non-conforming purchases that are made in the clerk's department. I have not received an email, didn't get a response. As elected officials know, you guys all work for us. So we're your employer, so I expect an answer, a response to that. And then lo and behold, in the Bay Voice, there was an article, an opinion article that came out that was titled Above Reproach, and it said Chesterfield Township trustee Joseph removed expenditures made by Clerk Berry from the bill run for board approval at the September 14th, 21 meeting, Township Board meeting. This was a lengthy discussion by Trustee Joseph, not for the amount spent, to make a point of Clerk Berry's constant violation of Chesterfield's purchasing policy. Clerk Berry in 2017 decided while visiting her neighborhood AT&T store that Chesterfield Township needed new cell phones. The neighborhood AT&T store manager, Rita, was happily to oblige. The invoice was for over $35,000 for new cell phones, and an annual service was sent to the township offices. Chesterfield's purchasing policy at the time clearly stated that the township board approval is required prior to all purchases over $3,000. Mr. LaFata, as treasurer at the time, I refused to approve the payment and place the issue on the township board agenda. Trustee Vosberg, however, supported payment. We used the services, she said, and it should be paid. Supported by the former Supervisor Accavetti that needed Clerk Berry's fourth vote. The issue of violating the purchasing policy by Clerk Berry was left to fester. Chesterfield also has a credit card policy. Clerk Berry again violates the credit card policy, puts in her purse and conveniently uses the credit card to purchase a bottle of Coke for $1.80. $1.80. A $100,000 employee using the township credit card for $1.80. Michigan Act 266 of 1995, Section 129.245, Section 5, the treasurer may limit or suspend the authority to issue and use credit cards. Mr. LaFata, I confiscated the clerk's department credit card for sign-out use only for purchases allowed by the policy. Clerk Berry continued to make purchases that violated Chesterfield and the state's policies, even after Chesterfield's legal counsel affirmed that they were in violation of state and township policy. The contested purchases by Trustee Joseph to make a point were made with the township credit card. In the private sector, employees are held accountable to follow policy. There are repercussions that include disciplinary actions and up to termination of employment. When a manager or supervisor, Clerk Berry, instructs an employee to violate policy or be fired for his or her manager or supervisor given the option to be fired or terminated or resign. The past support for Clerk Berry purchases by 3 members of the Township Board, not ethical and lacks integrity. Those board members allowed Clerk Berry the continued pleasure of being above reproach. The article is perfectly titled, Above Reproach. So again, this refrains back to a couple weeks ago with the violation of the purchasing policy of the mini fridge. It was pulled from the bill run, but I've yet to see a refund on the bill run for the $200. So when we ask employees of the township to follow our rules and guidelines, as board members and as supervisor, we have to enforce policies on ourselves and our elected officials. You need to lead by example. Most of our board members up here, there is no leading by example. If the township employees follow your example, there'd be no reason to fire them or even write any of them up, because I don't like what I see, I don't like what's gone on, and it's a continuous violation in this township. And I've yet to see somebody step up and reprimand and come out and say that these are wrong and we can't do this, and have a private meeting if you have to. But it has to end. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mike Wharton, 50393 Bauer. Just had 2 things to say. One was yesterday I actually went canoeing in Ann Arbor, and back right before the pandemic, it was February of last year, I actually attended I want to say a seminar or a conference, and there was actually an engineer from Ann Arbor, from U of M, who in Ann Arbor, they had installed these Wi-Fi connected smart control ports at certain drainage points all across the area around in and around Ann Arbor. And it was also interesting, being right before the pandemic, that this is where I saw like an applied method of flattening the curve, and they utilized this technology to control drainage a lot better. And so instead of having instead of having like flood surges during points of inclement weather, and having flooding that we see on a regular basis due to our proximity with Lake St. Clair, they utilize these narrow points along rivers, streams, entry points into lakes, sort of act like floodwater gates on dams. And it wasn't expensive infrastructure costing in the millions of dollars. It was literally 5-figure components in these specified drainage points. This technology, when displayed, did show a lot of promise, and I figure in certain areas within the township, specifically along the Salt River, it could technically be applied. Maybe not in most areas of it, but definitely more upstream, and it could control some of the flooding that we have seen in recent years. So look into that idea if it's more of some type of interest for the township or the general area. and it would go into play with the PFAS contamination in the future, possibly. The second thing I wanted to say was thank you to everybody who did come out to the open house. It was a lot of fun. It was great to see kids having a blast, getting to see fire engines, playing along with the different activities that were there, and seeing what it was like to be a firefighter. And everyone seemed to have had a good time, despite the weather. Thank you.
Any further public comments? Seeing none, trustee Domingue.
I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn tonight.
Motion by trustee Domingue,
Mr. Supervisor, you're in essence asking for a motion to amend the agenda. The agenda includes board comments, and there should be an opportunity for board members to speak, and I don't think you can simply adjourn and remove portions of the agenda.
so I have a motion by trustee Domingue, supported by trustee Vosberg, to adjourn the meeting. Clerk, Mayor, call the roll.
Mr. Supervisor, can we have debate on the motion? From a parliamentary standpoint, I can't believe we're eliminating board member opportunity to address the public. It seems like a violation of the Open Meetings Act. It's something I would definitely be looking to pursue legally. This is out of character, and I don't understand why the hostility towards your fellow board members. In essence, any board member who's called upon first can eliminate conversation from another board member.
I'll let council address it.
I can address the question of whether it's a violation of the Open Meetings Act, because I've litigated that issue before, as to whether or not at the end of a meeting, denying a board member comment once business has been completed is a violation, and I litigated that in St. Clair County Circuit Court, and the judge concluded that it was not. Because members of the public that are not members of the board that don't conduct business have an opportunity under the Open Meetings Act to appear before the board and make presentations to the board. But as board members, you have acted, and I'm reciting essentially what the judge ordered, that members of the board conduct business, they're able to comment on every item, and once the substantive part of the meeting is over, which it is now, it is not a violation of the Open Meetings Act. Whether or not, there's a decision to adjourn the meeting is up to the board, but I assure you it is not a violation of the Open Meetings Act.
Just a clarification then, Mr. Attorney. It is not, in your opinion, then substantial for public comments or public to ask their board members, historically in our APO affords board members to address members of the public. That is seen as not a substantial entity?
What I said was, again, I've litigated this issue. There was an argument that was made at that time.
We're going to be litigating it again, I can assure you that, but...
That may be. All I'm saying is, in that particular case, which was binding on those litigants in that court, the judge decided it was not a violation of the Open Meetings Act, and there may not be 4 votes for this anyway. It may be moot. But all I can tell you is there are no Court of Appeals decisions on the issue. I can tell you one circuit court has said that it's not a violation. It's up to 4 members of the...
In terms of violating our own APO?
But an APO is a board-initiated policy, and what policies you propose, you can also amend. Those are like any other policy of the board. They're policies. And if you decide that you don't want to follow a particular policy and 4 votes of the board decide that they don't want to do it, the majority of the board makes that decision.
Absolutely terrible. Thank you.
I'm not, again, Dave, I'm not weighing in on whether this is a good idea or not. I'm weighing in on what the Open Meetings Act says, what my experience on that question has been in a circuit court,
and there's no appellate decision on it.
Very good.
So I have a motion by trustee DeVlaminck, seconded by trustee Vosberg for adjournment. Clerk Berry?
Trustee DeVlaminck.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
No.
Trustee Joseph.
Absolutely not.
Treasurer Elliott. No. Supervisor Kersten.
No.
Clerk Berry. No.
Trustee Vosberg?
Thank you. Welcome to our new police officer that was sworn in this evening. And I'm glad that the fire department had a chance to have an open house. It's always great to show off our assets. Thank you.
Trustee Anderson?
I think Marvin Gaye said, what's going on? Now we're making comments? Or,
The motion failed.
oh, very good, thank you. Thank you, board members. A couple quick ones, I'll keep it positive. Congratulate our latest officer, the Chesterfield Township PD, Michael DeVlaminck, I apologize. DeVlaminck took his oath of office tonight. How'd you do, Chief? Are they okay? Captain Franks, you're running a good show here for if things pan out here. Chief Miller, great open house, and what you're doing as far as the safety of our residents, which you presented tonight. Thank you. There was some discussion about the payment of bills. I hope this BS&A kind of fleshes this up a little bit, because this payment of bills, the way it's handled now, it's there's a lot of questionable things going on there. The way it's in a consent agenda, and I think we have to look at that too. I guess I will let it go right there. Yes, we have a young gentleman from, he's in a Boy Scout troop in Utica. I don't have the troop. Adrian Cameron, he's been collecting empty pop containers throughout the area. And I believe he has a project, his legal project will be putting some type of safety markers along the Salt River, if I have it correct, and I want to commend him on that. So thank you much.
Trustee Joseph?
Thank you. First, let me start with the most aggressive move I think I've ever seen here. Residents come forward, they ask their board members questions. You can answer them or not, but to deny the ability to interact on specific issues seems very aggressive, and I have no idea what prompted that at all. It was really very aggressive and very disappointing. I will always attempt when asked. We had residents that got up and spoke about their physical well-being and concerns about PFAS and what are your elected officials doing. And then to try to deny the ability to even address that was just, I'm gonna stop talking about it because I'm just dumbfounded. We spent months and months talking about our APOs and the ability for residents to engage their elected officials, and then to eliminate, and then the support for that was really, I mean, an all-time low for us. I'm very disappointed, extremely. But who knows what's conspired, and what we work out behind the scenes. This is just another example of politicians talking transparency, 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 and then don't talk about anything that your residents want to know about. It's not important. Silence. As it relates to the PFAS, the concerns about the buildup in the body are legitimate, and this is from the video clip that was sent, confirmed year in and year out on these environmental studies. And I think in that presentation, it was estimated that a very high percentage of the U.S. population has been exposed on some level to PFAS, and it is something that builds up in the body. It never leaves. So If you have it in your blood now, it may not be at a harmful level, but continued exposure, it's not as if you are, excreting, or it never goes away. It never goes away. And so I think Chief Miller probably knows a considerable amount about the PFAS, as it has hit his industry probably the hardest, in that the chemical is found most commonly in fire suppression or flame retardant materials. And that is obviously something that the base uses on a pretty big level when conducting disaster emergency drills and utilizing chemical, fire retardant chemicals, and then having that absorb into the ground and then the groundwater. There was an environmental study. It actually is continuing, and part of the environmental study called for public hearings. Those were done in the middle of a COVID quarantine, unfortunately, so if you didn't get made aware of the base's interest in your opinions on the environmental impact of PFAS, or just the environmental impact of the base in general, you're not alone, because most people were completely unaware that there were public hearings and a window of opportunity for the public to weigh in. That closed in July. The environmental impact study was inclusive of an opportunity for anybody who was interested in more information about the environmental impact at Selfridge to submit a letter. Your letter had to be dated by July 20th, and I made a request of, and I don't know if I'm butchering his name, but Mr. Pash, who was the environmentalist heading up this study, indicated that he received my letter and request for a public hearing and would respond in short time to give me details about what that public hearing would look like. Again, that was in July, and I followed up and asked about it, and I will continue to follow up and ask about it. I do take it very seriously, and I am very concerned about the environmental impact of PFAS and the concentration levels that are, again, it's difficult to get. This is a federal military installation, so they are not necessarily turning over data on a regular basis to Eagle the way a private contractor or a business might have to do if they were located in the state. So those numbers are real unknown at this point to the general citizenry. I will continue to look at that, and certainly any base project that substantially changes or enhances the base has the potential for increased contaminants, PFAS being one of them. So I will stay on that as best I can and continue to ask for public hearings and information, and invite members of the public once I'm advised. I've also talked as a member of the compatibility and joint sustainability study for the county to help us and conduct a town hall style public hearing as part of that process. So I hope to have more information in a public venue where you'll be able to ask questions before there's a motion to adjourn. You'll be able to ask questions and hopefully have some of those questions answered. Tonight's agenda, I want to thank Mr. Duchesne for bringing a very well put together presentation. BSNA and the representative that spoke tonight has been here for almost a decade, or maybe even over a decade, as the account representative for BSNA. Very familiar, he is very familiar with our township, as well as the challenges. And I think the ability to do budgeting, and something that I think is imperative in terms of evaluating the cost of certain functions within our government, specifically an area that is of concern to everybody who pays a water bill, is knowing what the right amount of that water bill should be. Not lost on me that the individuals that got up and spoke tonight have also been very attentive to the water and sewer rate as members, past members of the advisory committee. They know in detail what I would say 95% of the township residents are unaware of, and that is how their bill is calculated and what goes into their bill. And I think if more residents were aware of the efficiencies and perhaps areas where we're not so efficient and why that costs them, on their water bill, they would be maybe a little more engaged. I think we're rapidly approaching a place where we're going to see a water rate increase because of some of our practices, and I hope that BSNA will help us to avoid some of those wasteful practices. Specifically, project management and the ability to track big ticket items. So for many months, maybe years, we've approved purchase of water meters on our consent agenda. It's become so routine that the purchase of those meters is regularly done as just a bill run. It just is, it's inclusive in the consent agenda. But if we were to go back and ask where all of those meters went, into which houses and which equipment was used, which equipment was used to install what meters, what people worked on those meters, we would have a real mess. We would have a real mess on our hands because it's simply not there. It's simply not there. When we hear facilities and operations get up and talk about projects that are going on and using in-house labor, some of that labor could be DPW employees, and the commingling of man hours, or work hours, directly impacts your water bill. Everything involving one department staying in their lane and being accountable is something that can be measured, tracked, and visible to the general public through BSNA. That was the reason for the purchase, but it's only going to be valuable if we utilize it. In closing, and in the same spirit of staying in our lane and talking about things that are within our department, last board meeting we had a presentation by the treasurer about Brandenburg Park. And in my opinion, the presentation exceeded a department report from the treasurer. Specifically, we had a treasurer department employee who was being interviewed by the treasurer about public feedback on everything from what they'd like to see at Brandenburg Park in the way of food trucks and tracking data, as she called it. And it migrated way away from the treasurer's office in a very direct, this is what Brandenburg Gate realized in the last year. It went away from that, and it talked about future park utilization, and this employee would be then tracking that. I followed up with our Leisure Services Director, having served in Parks and Rec, and I was appreciative that the supervisor made mention of this. Brandenburg Park has always been it's not a revenue generator. It is a service that's provided to the residents. So to have a presentation that didn't include the Leisure Services Director talking about the gate totals without also incorporating the expenditures associated with those gate totals, so having people in the gatehouse collecting fees is an expenditure that is not, I think the number was, say, $120,000, and the pavilion rentals. It got very, very detailed, and then it was, in my opinion, a disservice to the Leisure Services Department. And it was, in thinking about it, I had a conversation with Trustee DeVlaminck, as he's the liaison to Parks and Rec, and I hope his attempt to silence people on the board tonight has nothing to do with that, because the conversation seemed cordial, which was to simply say that in the upcoming budget talks, maybe it would be helpful to talk about appropriately outfitting the personnel in leisure services. In that if the treasurer's office has staff that are dedicated to monitoring food trucks, maybe that staff member could go to, or that slot could go to Parks and Rec, where Parks and Rec could employ a programming specialist who could then really bring revenue and drive programming in a meaningful way. But to simply have the treasurer speculating on food trucks and things was in my opinion, a problem. It was a problem. I'm hopeful that BSNA will give us the opportunity to meet that challenge, which is departments staying in their lane and working on the projects that are earmarked for them And then, of course, that translates to proper accountability, and the words that were used by Treasurer LaFata about being accountable and responsible and all of those things. This software will allow us to do that if properly rolled out. So I felt it was a great meeting, and I appreciate, as always, the residents that come in. Some people, they sit and they just soak it all up, and they don't have anything to say this night. But when a question is asked of a board member, what are you doing about my safety? And there's an attempt to silence that, you know, it was really disappointing. I'm gonna have to find out what that was about. I don't really know why we would ever do that, especially after months and months of debating the APO and trying to figure out when the residents could speak and what they could be, you know, it was just terrible. But again, the motion was puzzling. The second on that motion was even more disturbing because for the better part of 20 years, I've heard nothing about except transparency and the ability to interact with residents and more participation and answering questions. So that was a stunner to me. It seemed rehearsed and scripted and planned, and it was real ugly. I'm disappointed that it was made and brought forward. I am at least happy that 5 board members saw it the same way I did and said, what in the heck is going on here, and voted it down promptly. But it was disappointing, and it killed an otherwise great meeting where we had a lot of discussion and a lot of participation from the residents. So thank you for that.
Treasurer Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Hoping that in 2022, we will be able to return to the traditional tree lighting. Sorry to hear that we'll have to make some changes again this year. I'm excited to hear that we are adding the weather stations. That was good news. And then also, as Mr. Duchesne pointed out, and tonight in the BSNA agenda item, there are many changes in process that are preparing for the migration to the BSNA cloud. The preparation includes such things as credit card usage and purchasing policies. There will be a lot of training and preparation that is needed to help the staff prepare for new procedures and software. So in regards to various questions and concerns about some of the shifts that are happening and that people are seeing, we are very aware of it. We've met quite a bit about the BSNA cloud over the last 6-7 months, and it'll be interesting to see how the process goes moving forward. Thank you, and have a good night.
Clerk Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I appreciate the opportunity. So a couple of things, just I know it's getting late, and I know that we want to wrap this up. But earlier today, I was able to participate and communicate with a group of Michigan citizens who are concerned about election integrity. And you may have seen that in the media today. I did have the opportunity and was asked actually to address some of them and their concerns. For those of you who aren't aware, prior to being clerk and elected in 2012, I've been an election administrator certified by the state of Michigan since 2012. I also served on our board of canvassers for a decade prior to that. I served as vice chair as well as chairman of that board since 2000. So over 2 decades of elections experience. And so I was asked to address some of their concerns, and they may be concerns that other members of the public have as well. And one of the things that I can assure you, you're going to hear a lot of things in the media. You know, remember what our parents told us, don't believe everything you read? Trust me, please don't believe everything that you read. It's incumbent upon all of us to get the facts. And oftentimes what I'm finding when I'm speaking to people, and I encouraged individuals to get the facts before they begin to spread information that's just not accurate. We're finding this with some of these folks that I spoke with today. They're very well-meaning, they are very concerned, and they have valid concerns. However, the information that's being circulated is very inaccurate, or it's misleading, or in some way is not correct. And what's happening is that's just simply getting regurgitated over and over and over again and getting bigger and bigger and bigger every time. And so what we end up with an electorate or a population of people that aren't properly informed. And so I would encourage you, whether it is in the area of elections, I can assure you that elections here in Chesterfield Township, we have worked cooperatively with various agencies as one of the leaders, in fact, in election integrity to ensure that our elections were entirely secure. I can also personally guarantee that everything that I have looked at and been presented with to date, any concerns with anything having to do with improper voter registrations or anything of that nature, anything regarding our elections was absolutely 100% found to be wrong. We were completely 100% correct in everything that we've done. Our records are all 100% accurate. And everything that I've looked at has given me no evidence. I've seen zero evidence of any election fraud. And it may come as a surprise to some because I know it seems to be quite a bit of a partisan push, and being that I'm obviously an elected Republican, that perhaps, that we kind of want to throw in with that. And the reality of the situation is there may still be concerns out there. I still have some concerns for things that I've seen statewide, and I think that those things need to be addressed. But I can assure that the residents here in Chesterfield Township, every vote counted. There was one person, one vote, every vote counted, and that we were able to certify that our election results were accurate. And so I am always willing to look at any evidence, any concerns, listen to any issues from anyone who has a concern about any of our election protocols, results, how we do things. Happy to educate the public on any of that. So if you have any concerns about that, first off, please understand you don't want to believe everything you read. Oftentimes what I'm finding is that some people are so deeply invested in their personal authorship that the facts simply don't count. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. They're just so very deeply invested in their personal authorship that they're not even looking at the facts, and they're not encouraging others to look at them. And so I can assure you that here in the clerk's office, when we're asked for information, we provide the information. We want to provide as much transparency as possible, whether it's regarding elections or whether it's regarding a purchasing policy or an expense. I can also say that the clerk's office has never violated the purchasing policy, and I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone who would like to have a conversation about that. Be happy to make an appointment with you, and we'll look at whatever records you want to look at. They're all, again, everything here is a public record. You have the right to ask to see any of those things, and I encourage people to do that because that's where the facts are. Oftentimes things are misrepresented. You'll be able to see them in the proper context because they're often taken out of context as well. So I saw a lot of that today, and hopefully have gone to some extent, helped people understand how to get the right information. I'm willing to be a catalyst to help people get that correct information, and I'll sit down with them and look at it with them. So if anyone has concerns about any of those things, all those public records are available. I am available to help navigate and help you access those records. Our FOIA coordinator, our new FOIA coordinator, is adapting well, but she's a little overwhelmed with some of the backlog. But Deputy Clerk Niza's done an outstanding job of trying to get caught up to date with all of our FOIAs, and I'm happy to say that we are up to date with all of our FOIAs now. So not to say we're encouraging more FOIAs for Deputy Clerk Niza, but she'll certainly be able and happy to accept any FOIA requests. We will handle those in turn. So please get the facts. Don't believe everything that you read, and we are here to help. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll try and make it quick, just a few quick thoughts. Brandenburg Park will continue as long as I am here to highlight Brandenburg Park and all parks within the township, and promote them in whatever fashion or manner that I can, along with the department heads. The comment about the HVAC system within this building, you will see a presentation here in the coming, I believe the next board meeting, which addresses that exact cost. Again, it is a problem. It's been a historical problem, and we're tackling it as we speak now. The video, there was a comment made about the video. Yes, that video, I plan on continuing that video system and including all the electeds in the making of such video, and it was made to highlight the township. One of the first meetings I took was with regional partners that said, what does Chesterfield have to offer? The best way that I thought immediately we could address that was to create a promotional video, and there will be more coming. I want to thank the board for the BSNA approval tonight. I hope, and the tone of it sounded as though everybody recognized the single platform system that we need within this township that has been lacking again for years. Yes, this system is no longer siloed. It will be implemented township-wide. The proper data will be placed into it. You have no choice but to. And it allows the managers and the department heads to manage what their budget is almost live and in real time, along with the supervision that is necessary to deny or approve purchases as made. And again, those systems are going to be developed as we move forward. Fire Department Open House was a huge success. Chief Miller, public safety team, and all the firefighter staff did a great job. Home run again. Repeating congratulations to Lieutenant Rowley and Captain Scalisi. Those were their completion of staff and command is a career goal, and it demonstrates leadership, and they should be recognized. On a side note, an open topic that is being addressed, the Salt River Pathway and the bridge. We had our engineers, along with Macomb County road engineers from the Road Commission, meet out there. They reviewed the design, and they're very comfortable. Their statement was it meets or exceeds the current standards, and they gave the standards. I didn't write them down. And also moving forward within the next, you'll see at the next agenda, again, more presentations to update the systems and the networks within this township. And one of them is this facility. This facility, as I said previously, has not received a major makeover. There are IT deficiencies. There are HVAC deficiencies. Yes, we did do a renovation to the lobby area, but it goes deeper than that. So you will see those, that presentation at the next board meeting. That being said, I will take a motion to adjourn. Trustee Joseph?
Second.
Clerk Berry? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned.